What it felt like to be the last human of your kind. You are not the first kind of human to walk this earth. You are the only kind left. For most of human history, that sentence would have made no sense. There wasn't just one human species looking up at the stars. There were several. At the same time, on the same planet. Sometimes in the same valley, and every single one of them is gone now. Except you, somewhere, at some point, for every single one of those other human species, there was a final individual. A last one? Someone who woke up one morning as the only member of their entire kind left breathing on Earth, and very likely had no idea that's what they were. Let's start with the most well-documented case, because the evidence here is staggering. For roughly 400,000 years, Neanderthals thrived across Europe and parts of Asia. They were not the stooped, grunting cavemen of old cartoons. Archaeological evidence shows they buried their dead, sometimes with flowers. They cared for injured group members who could no longer hunt. Skeletons have been found with healed but severe injuries, meaning someone fed and protected that individual for years after they became a burden, not an asset. They made jewelry. They controlled fire. Their brains on average were slightly larger than yours. For 400,000 years, this worked. Then, somewhere between 40,000 and 28,000 years ago, depending on which site you look at, it stopped working. Modern Homo sapiens, your direct ancestors, began moving into Neanderthal territory. And over the following several thousand years, the Neanderthal population didn't disappear overnight. It thinned, generation by generation, group by group, valley by valley. The most recent confirmed Neanderthal remains, found in Gorham's Cave on the Rock of Gibraltar, have been dated to approximately 28,000 years ago. I want you to actually sit with what that site represents. Gibraltar is the southern tip of Europe. It is, quite literally, the edge of the continent. Researchers studying the site believe this may represent one of the last refugees of the Neanderthal population, pushed generation after generation toward a corner of the map with nowhere left to retreat, which means somewhere in that cave, or somewhere near it, there was an actual Neanderthal individual who was, biologically, the last one, or close enough to the last one that they likely never encountered another member of their own species again for the remainder of their life. Think about what that means. Not symbolically, literally. This was a being capable of language, capable of grief, capable of recognizing faces and forming bonds, who at some point looked around and realized, slowly, terribly, that the people who looked like them sounded like them, understood the specific signals and expressions only their own kind truly understood were gone, and were not coming back. We have no transcript of what that felt like. There was no writing yet, but we have something almost as powerful. We have their burials. We know Neanderthals grieved because we found graves where the dead were positioned carefully, intentionally, sometimes with objects placed beside them that served no practical purpose except meaning. A being that grieves like that does not stop grieving just because the population around them shrinks. If anything, the grief would have compounded. Loss after loss after loss, with no new individuals being born to replace what was lost. Here's where the anthropology gets genuinely unsettling. Researchers studying small, isolated populations, both in the fossil record and in modern endangered species, have identified something called the Allee effect. It's a concept from population biology, and it describes a brutal mathematical reality. Below a certain population size, a species doesn't just decline. It accelerates toward extinction because the population becomes too small to function as a population at all. Mates become harder to find. Genetic diversity collapses, leading to inbreeding and weaker offspring. Cooperative behaviors that the species relied on for survival, group hunting, shared childcare, collective defense, become impossible with too few individuals to actually form a group. For a species like Neanderthals, who likely lived in small bands of maybe 15 to 30 individuals to begin with, the Allee effect would have been catastrophic. You don't need every Neanderthal on Earth to die for the species to end. You just need each remaining group to drop below the threshold where they can function as a group. After that point, even individuals who are alive, healthy, and capable of reproducing are functionally already extinct because there's no one left to reproduce with. This means the actual moment of extinction almost certainly wasn't one dramatic final death. It was a slow unraveling. Small groups becoming smaller groups. Smaller groups becoming isolated individuals. Isolated individuals living out the remainder of their lives completely alone, or absorbed into Homo sapiens groups nearby. Which brings us to the most haunting part of this story. They didn't all die alone, some of them didn't disappear in isolation. Some of them, the genetic evidence suggests, ended up living among US. If you have European or Asian ancestry, there is a real, measurable chance that somewhere between 1 and 4% of your DNA right now in your body as you watch this is Neanderthal. Not metaphorically related, literally inherited. Passed down through actual interbreeding between Homo sapiens and Neanderthals. Tens of thousands of years ago, geneticist Svante Pääbo, who won the Nobel Prize in 2022 for sequencing the Neanderthal genome, helped prove this conclusively. Modern humans outside Africa carry Neanderthal DNA because our ancestors and Neanderthals didn't just coexist. They had children together, which means some of the last Neanderthals on Earth weren't dying alone in caves. Some of them were absorbed generation by generation into the expanding population of Homo sapiens. Their genes didn't vanish. They diluted, spread thin across a different species until Neanderthal stopped being a separate category and started being a faint genetic echo inside something else entirely, in a strange way. That might be even harder to process than extinction. Imagine not dying out exactly, but dissolving. Your children having children with a different kind of human, and their children doing the same, until within a handful of generations, nobody remembers there was ever a difference at all.